Yo, what is up, everybody? Good to see you all joining us today for another awesome podcast, Pastor Sal podcast. And you'll notice, well, I'm back. I haven't been streaming for a while, but we do have some changes that we've made. And I am back for the Pastor Sal podcast. And we don't have Ashley or Steven with me, but we do have the other lightly salted admin member here, Sarah. If you want to introduce yourself.
Oh, hi everyone. You guys seen or heard me at least before. Um, but yeah, I guess maybe it's the first time you see me. But yeah, it's the special guest for this one episode.
The special guest, yes, the one episode, and today's theme is essentially about about God in music and worship and all that kind of perspective. Good to see you all here. Oh, I see Lois in chat. I see Steven in chat. You better not be texting and driving, Steven. That'd be very bad. But yeah, we have this. I think this topic speaks, I guess, into my. I don't want to say expertise, but I definitely being a worship team leader at our church, like it helps me a lot with kind of this topic and my thoughts about it. But for you, Sarah, like I mean, you don't do worship team stuff, but with
I have
like
been part of the worship team.
being before, yes, you
Yeah, but
played.
not right now.
What did you play before? If you want
Oh,
to fully.
I played the cello for our team, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it basically overlaps with the bass. If anyone doesn't really know what a cello does, but yeah, very
Yeah,
similar
no.
keys.
I think that was an interesting worship team that we had back then with like instruments. I liked the sound. It was like really full. It was like
Yeah,
a
we had
fuller
a lot
sound.
of variety. We had like guitar, we had electric, we had a bass, we had a cello, we had a violin at one point, we had a drum, we had two pianos, a synth, and like a keyboard, and like a vocalist, female and male. It was a really full praise team.
Yeah, I think like after that praise, I think it was like a month or two after that. I actually stepped down if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure I stepped down
Yeah, you
during
didn't
during that praise
stay
team.
for very long for that season.
Yeah, I definitely stepped down because I was like I wasn't worshiping for the sake of worshiping anymore, which kind of leads into the first question, like understanding what it means to worship in particular. So like, well, for you, what made you join the praise team? Like for you, because like at a cello, as a cellist, it's that isn't exactly an instrument that's normally seen on the worship team. But like, what made you like decide to join the worship team in the first
I
place?
think with most of my skills and abilities, I think that we should be using them to glorify God. And really, I learned the cello because my parents told me to. And then, like, what am I going to do with it? I'm not going to go into, like, an orchestra or anything. Like, I felt like I could use it to worship God in some way. And I thought it'd be
Mm.
fun. I think Brandon Lee at that time was doing violin. So I'm like, oh, maybe I can join as a cellist, is what I
Mm.
thought. There wasn't much more depth to it. It's just I just wanted to use my skills to worship.
I think that's good. I feel like that's maybe I'm biased, but I feel like that's what's missing with our like younger generation now. I mean, we go to the same church, so maybe you have the same concerns as I do, but it's like it's hard to get, at least for me as a worship team leader, it's been hard to get students out and committed to coming out to like whether it's serving in the worship team or even serving in any other role within the church, especially with the pandemic too. It's like
I
the
think
students, I find students don't want to do it.
yeah, I think it's a little bit different because for us, I feel like it's we volunteered our time and we offered to join. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with the younger kids, there wasn't already an established praise team and it was kind of just starting, so we were kind of like coercing them to join us. But they didn't really
I
like
guess so. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
100% be like, "Oh yeah, I want to do this and I want to join." Right? They don't really know like what it means to be a praise team because there wasn't really a praise team for them to look up to at the time, at least.
That's true. I guess that yeah, because it was only me and one other person for a majority of the pandemic, right? So I guess that is true as well. But I feel like beforehand too, we had a small praise team thing going for the high school kids, but I feel like it's just not as not. I don't know. It's hard to kind of put a label on it. I just hope that they could start coming out more. I mean, we have one student coming out more, but I would love for them to kind of take charge of their worship and things like that. I mean, we still have people who are not even coming out to worship in service yet. Not everyone's coming out to worship in service yet.
Hmm.
Which actually, I'm curious
Well,
on your thoughts on that. Do you think we should continue live streaming, or do you think like would there be a point where we should just stop it and have people just come out in person?
I don't think that we should stop it. I think
Mm.
that we should continue live streaming. I feel like if anything, if we stop it, it's like a step back. Like why
Mm.
make it harder for people to worship God? What if there are circumstances where they just really can't come and they just can't show up?
Right.
And wouldn't it be better? I remember like one time, like I was in like high school, elementary, or middle school around that time. There was a snowstorm. We literally couldn't leave the house. Like at that time, wouldn't it have been awesome if we had live stream, right?
Mm.
So things like that. It's like I think live streaming in general is a step forward. Like using technology to better our lives, not to necessarily deter it. Yeah, in some cases, yeah, it might make us more lazy and not come out, but like I feel like that's a completely different um battle that a person has to, you know, kind of wrestle with God about, where it's like, where are your priorities and who is your God and your king, and like, and where is God
Yeah.
telling you to go?
No. Yeah. I think that's the thing that kind of makes me think about it with the whole idea of worshiping at home and being the norm for so many people, right? It's hard to get people to come out of their house and come to church for worship. And I think like it's hard to describe, but I think you and I'm sure you agree, but like it's definitely so much more or so much better when you worship in person. It
Oh
just
yeah, of
feels
course.
better, right? And it's like, but it's weird because like you would tell that to people, but then sometimes those people don't. They're like, yeah, I'm sure it is, and then they just don't come out. Like they don't
I mean,
really
it might
still
be
don't come
different for
out.
different people. Maybe
Yeah.
the idea of worshiping in front of other people, they're like very self-conscious about their voice and they can't, belt out and worship God in the same way they could at their house, right?
Hmm.
So I think it's different for different people. But I think in general, personally for me, yeah, it definitely sounds better and is, um, yeah, I don't know, less distractions as well.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Um, yeah, and with that, like with worship, I think it does say worship and music, but I think what I want to share with people in chat and those that are watching right now is understanding that like what Sarah said before, like when she said joining joining the praise team to use a gift that God gave her. I think that's the really important part there is understanding that worship doesn't have to just be music. It doesn't have to be about just music or like just service at church. I think a big part of it is really understanding like if you know that God gave each and every one of us a gift, I think it's for us to find out what that gift is and how we can use it to better his kingdom. And that's worship, right? To be able to serve God and serve others is what worship is. It doesn't always have to be about music. And so for myself, yes, that it coincides that for myself that I do have like musical ability as well. Like I am able to sing to a certain extent. I'm able to play drums, or I picked up guitar. But in addition to that, I would say my other gift is to be able to teach, to be able to talk like this on like the podcast and stuff. Like I would say that's a gift that I would like to that I think God has given me. Then I want to be able to use that and things like that. I bet time to go karaoke, Stephen. Yeah, I'm down. I'm always down for karaoke. Um, and Sarah and I went to like a worship retreat where our church, not a worship retreat, sorry, a church retreat, like a winter retreat, where our church really focused on narrowing down like what each of our individual gifts were, and I think it was like really surprising to see how different everyone's gifts were within the church. And it's like to the point. I think what I found most surprising out of it, and you can share your thoughts about that retreat too, was that every single category was covered by at least one person within our group. I found that really cool. I found that really interesting. Like that,
Yeah.
everyone has such different talents.
I had a conversation about something similar to this with another person from another church, and like I said in a very like kind of like I don't know, maybe like too confident tone. Like who am I to say like I know what God's thinking? But like I almost felt like God has placed at least maybe like one person who can do music in every church. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
how is it that every church can have a praise team? You know,
Oh, that's a good
not
point.
not to say that, every praise team is like, Starfield or like Hillsong level, but like there's someone who's able to serve in that capacity and willing to serve in that capacity is another thing too. And I think it's very interesting that it just happens that way. And I thought that was, yeah, really cool.
I never. Now that you mention it, that is definitely true. Like, I'm like thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, that's 100% true. There's always been uh, uh like every church that I know has always had someone or people that are musically talented in one way or another that they can lead. I think that's so true. But yeah, it coincides with what I was saying. Like there's always at least one or two people within the church that has a gift that no one else has and that's able to cover that ground. And it's I think we our church Bethel has been um, working hard and taking the right steps on how we can just because you know the gift and just because you know what gifts people have, it's a whole different story to take that step forward and helping those people realize their gifts and their potential, and also getting them to serve the church. That's like another step, right? It's like there one step is to identify your gifts, and then the second step is to take the step forward to serve the church using your gifts. And I think we're for our church, I think we're definitely in the right direction on getting people involved within the church. Um, and I think it's been really nice to see. I mean, the growth in our churches as well. If we had like the other members here from the podcast, I'd be curious to hear their thoughts, and people in chat if you have like experiences within your church, like about how can you easily not easily. I don't think easily is the right word, but what's the right way to approach people or how prepare them to serve the church. Like that's always I feel like that step is always so difficult. Like we were mentioning with the students, it's always so difficult to get students now to serve the church, right? That commitment is so hard.
I feel like it's not even about like now or then. It's just like it's always been about that, like
Mm,
I remember Pastor Alvin back in the day, had a sermon where he was saying like, there's only it's like that iceberg kind of effect in church as well, where it's like only 10% of the entire church is like really serving and working hard for like the rest of the 90%. And
yeah.
like of course if it was like the opposite, it would be so much better. But I think the church has always been, like or the idea of church has always been like, oh, feed me, I don't want to like it's never about like, oh, how can I feed other people or how can I serve, and that's why a lot of church hopping exists and shopping and stuff where people just like, oh, I don't like this pastor. Oh, this church doesn't have enough programs for me. Oh, this church doesn't, I don't like their praise. I don't like these kind of people in this church. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's all about themselves and what the church can do for them and not so much
Hmm.
like what can I do for church.
No, that's true. That's definitely true. Like with with yeah, I think that your explanation of that is like the difference between like like getting fed, but also like, but that's not like we're talking about this topic of worship. It's like you can't just have one aspect, right? If you say you want to worship God, there's more to worship than just listening to a sermon or receiving anything, right? And that's what we're trying to get across today, right? The idea that you really need to, if you as if you're trying to live your life as a Christian, at a certain point you can't just serve yourself. You have to serve others, and you have to figure out a way that you can do that. And you have to come to the realization that you also. It's not like, oh, you have to do it or you can't go to heaven. I'm not saying that. But it's like when you live a Christian life, it's like that's what God calls you to do. That's the gifts that we're mentioning that He's given. Um,
Isn't there like a Bible verse like if you love your brothers or sisters or something, you would like serve one another or something like that? I don't remember.
if we can recall the actual verse, if anyone in chat knows for sure, uh, I'm sure like there's many verses that refer like there was the memory verse that we did for discipleship too, right? With the whole true and proper worship, right? Offer yourselves as a whole
Living
holy
sacrifices.
living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God, right? Like that in itself, it's like to be a living sacrifice is not just to receive, like that's something you do. Yeah, to offer yourself as a sacrifice is an action. It's not inaction, right? It is an action for you to take a step forward to offer yourself as a living sacrifice to God, right? That's a strong statement, and if that's like what worship is, then like you were saying, like just being going to church and just receiving is clearly not just is not full worship. I think that's what kind of goes into it, and I think that's really important there. Um, well, let's kind of link that into, I guess, with the second part, which is about music. And I know you mentioned earlier before we started this year, like I don't know if I'm the best person to talk about music, but I mean I think anyone can talk about music because everyone has their own personal tastes and stuff, right? Um, with like whether it's Christian music or regular music in general. So I know there's a lot of people that kind of, or not. I don't want to say a lot of people, but I know there's people that might think like Chris are Christians allowed to listen to secular music? Is that completely okay? What are your thoughts on that?
Uh, you know what? I think it is okay, but I also think there is a benefit to not listening to secular music. I
Mm,
think that personal experience or is like I find that like the more I don't know, the more I listen to other music, the other music kind of like because you know like sometimes like certain music gets stuck in your head or like you just always recall certain music because that's the music that you like, right?
yeah.
So then if you I don't know listen to a lot of I don't know very degenerate like lyrical music. Like I know some people listen to it just for the beats or whatever, but like I mean I'm sure at some point these kind of lyrics kind of sink into your mind, or you can like kind of sing along with it, and then it's just kind of like do I really want that kind of stuff to like just pop up in my head in the random middle of the day? I don't know, just something like I just rather not.
Mm,
And for me it's like the less I don't know like for me garbage is in my head then the better but obviously that's subjective to myself. I'm sure some people do prefer to do that
mm,
and I'm like not do it for the purpose of but like just they don't mind it or something but like for myself I rather like I listen when I listen to music I really listen to the lyrics and I really think a lot of the lyrics are really messed up so I don't
oh yeah, no,
agree
for
with
sure.
to listening to them. And but other people just don't listen to it and just like the beat. So I don't know. And I also prefer not listening to music with lyrics in general anyways, because I find that the human voice kind of ruins the music sometimes. It's like in the beginning of the music, it's like, oh, it sounds so amazing, like violin, orchestra. It's like, oh wow, so epic. And all of a sudden, like it just disappears, and like all of a sudden, it's this one vocalist, and like just like the music is gone. It's like, oh, well then, that didn't sound like it just almost like downgraded in my opinion. But
Mm.
but at the same time, I also love choirs and like I love operas and like where the voice is just so can be so amazing. But I don't know, just maybe I'm just weird.
No, I think with like I can like I understand with choirs and operas and things like that. The the joining of voices in harmony, like the reason why that works is because it sounds full, right? Having a fuller sound where you cover the whole range of tones from low bass to high soprano, right? Being able to mix that well, it's like the understanding for me as a violist, right? Not many people understand what a violist is. They're like, "Do you mean a violinist?" I'm like, "No, I'm a violist," which I played the viola in middle school and high school. But the understanding, like as a kid, I never appreciated it, right? The viola, because the violin was the melody, like you want to play the melody, or the cello had the bass line, which was clearly audible. But the viola felt so lackluster, where it was just kind of in between, and it felt like it did nothing. Especially when I'm practicing alone, the viola alone sounds like garbage. Like, well, I don't want to say garbage, but in the sense of like, if I play a song, like I'm playing like let's say for example in high school I was playing Pirates of the Caribbean. Like playing the viola part is like this is boring. But then when you play it with the orchestra it sounds better. But I never realized that I the viola was such a crucial part of it. Just like in a full choir, the understanding that if that I'm the harmony that fills in that empty gap that's missing to make it sound better, right? It makes it sound more full. So I think I agree with you on the choir and opera part where like if you prefer that music, it's because you enjoy that whole full sound and ensemble of sounds coming together to make something so grand or make it sound so grand. I definitely agree on that. With secular music, though, there's like everyone has their own personal preference to music, right? Like for example, I know you don't like jazz, but I like jazz, for
Oh,
example, right?
I like it, but it just gives me a headache.
Yeah. Yeah, and so everyone has their own like little like things that they prefer or don't prefer, and I think that's okay. But with secular music, like you were mentioning about lyrics, like it's like you could. I think everyone can. Music is a language that everyone can enjoy, right? Because you don't need actual words. You don't technically need lyrics for it. If you play music, you play music. If you listen to it, it can transcend language. But I think the big thing there is that like what you said was if you know the lyrics aren't good, it's I don't think that's something you should be listening to. And I think you mentioned this to others too. If God's saying if God's telling you or you feel uncomfortable, then it's probably something you shouldn't listen to, right? If you feel uncomfortable listening to it, even though the music might sound good. And I think that's a good call. I think that's like a good baseline to kind
I
of
think
follow through.
one thing you also should be careful about is if you're
Yeah.
like already desensitized to God's voice, then you might not be able to hear God's voice because you haven't been really obeying Him in the first place. You know what I
Mm.
mean? So if you're already in a place in a mindset where your God isn't really priority or you're not really obeying God in the everyday, then maybe like this music thing, maybe God is speaking to you, but you're just so desensitized to His voice and can't really hear that. But I think all in all, if we all seek God first in our life, then yeah, everything should fall in place, like Matthew 6:33.
Oh yeah. No. Uh with listening, I mean, I think I've mentioned this before on a previous podcast, but listening to God's voice is a skill that you have to practice, and it takes time and effort. And I only know like a handful of people that can do it, like on that practice it on a regular basis, right? Um, so I think that's really important to do, and it links into if you really want to know what God has planned for you, then you can't just pray to God and leave it there. You have to listen to Him too. If you're saying that if people relate Christianity and don't say it's not just a religion, it's a relationship. It's like, well, the relationship isn't one sided; it's two sided. Where you can't just throw everything to God and then just leave God on the sideline after you give him all of your, like you also have to listen to God too, right? You have to take the time to actually put the effort to listen to Him and follow and follow His instructions as well. And I think that's the part people forget very often. And people are like, "Oh, I can't hear God. How can you even hear God?" And it's like, "Well, have you tried?" It's like, "No, you haven't tried." And I still have. I'm like, I'm trying, and I always try to do that, but It's hard. It takes skill with that. But with music, like, are there any? Do you think there's any specific type of music that, for sure, regardless of lyrics or not, it's like this genre of music should not be listened to at all
I
as a
don't
Christian?
I don't think so. I
I don't
think
think so.
all genres of music can worship God in their own ways, and I think it really depends on the artist itself and like maybe the producer, like just and how they're using the medium. Like money itself is not evil. It's like how you use the money that could be used for
Mm-hmm.
evil, right? The same way I think music originally was made to worship God. In the same way, like I think in heaven we're all gonna be worshiping God and singing in praises. So I think music is from God in the first place. So I don't think there is a genre that could offend God. And this
Yeah,
personal opinion.
I think with that, a big thing with that is like you said, all genres worship God. All genres can worship God. But what threw me off was that if you listen to like the new modern Christian music, that contemporary Christian music that was like designed for the younger generation, it throws me off. It's almost like EDM mixed in with Christian music, and it threw me off. I was like, "What is this?" But then it comes to a realization, like for us when we were in high school and middle school, like rock was a big part of the genre, including rap and stuff. But like a lot of Starfield and like Hillsong focused on the rock genre. Like that was the basis of their music back then too. So it's just the realization, but it's so odd to me that I'm hearing EDM with Christian music. It sounds so weird to me.
Think as we evolve, like music evolves, and at some point, like drums were banned from churches because drums originally originated from Africa, and they're from like the witch doctors, and like is a more of a spiritual thing where they're
Hmm.
using it to worship their whatever they worship in Africa. And so drums were perceived as like, oh, that's not holy. You can't put that up in the service. And for a while, I don't know if you remember, but like even our drum set in our church used to be not on the stage, but like on the bottom floor, like on the very corner of on like not on the stage either.
Hmm.
And that was because of just that kind of mindset of like these contemporary music is so unholy and so like how can they worship God like in that kind of way. Just um in the same way I think yeah like maybe we don't get it, but like I think that's like with every generation. Just grow up with a certain kind of music, then you can worship better in different
Yeah,
ways.
you gotta match at a certain point. If you're creating music, you gotta match the audience that you're making it for, right? Well, that's all. Like I feel like that's just a whole other topic of.
If
I
they're
feel like
making
I'm getting old.
I don't know if they're making it for, if it's just the new generation making it from their own preferences, you know what I mean?
I gotta look into that. That's true. Like I don't from what I remember, I don't think it is. I don't think it's the new generation that made that music, but I could be wrong. I gotta look into a little more detail. I forget if it was Hillsong or someone else that made it, but definitely that threw me off for
Well,
sure.
different generations of Hillsong, right? It's not always the same singer,
Hmm.
always
Yeah,
different groups of people.
yeah.
Because
But
from
if
what I
it's
know,
like
Hillsong has like a school where they have like generations of different musicians just coming in, right?
yeah, and they have major groups like they have Hillsong, Hillsong United, and then there's Hillsong Kids, which specifically make song for kids and stuff like that. So that's definitely different. Um, and then, of course, the whole thing with like like different groups like Chris Tomlin, Starfield, like Matt Redman, Matt Meir, all this group, Shane and Shane. Uh, Everyone has their own style. And Shane known for like covering a lot of different Christian music as well, and kind of remaking it and rearranging it for worship. Um, yeah, I'm like, with continuing from there, like every worship team within a church has their own style of making music, and if you like if you in the chat, whoever is listening to this podcast, are thinking of joining a praise team and you're afraid to, like, I don't think you should be afraid to join the praise team. Like, I wholeheartedly agree with Sarah, what she said before at the beginning of the podcast. If you think you have a gift and you want to use that gift, you should not be afraid to use that gift to worship God. And if you feel like you're not up to skill, then the people who at your church who are part of the group, like part of the praise team, maybe will help you, help you build that skill and build that gift, so that you are confident and more comfortable in playing within the church. Like the only thing would be like at our church as a praise team leader, like we have set rules for our praise team members, which is essentially like you have to be committed. We have like a 1 month probation period where you come to practice with us, but you don't play with us on Sunday service. But it's to show that you are dedicated and committed, uh, to worshiping and coming out for practices. That you have a heart of worship. That it's not just about the music. That you're doing it for God, and I think that's really hard for some people. Like understanding that. Um, and those regulations, like it's not just set by me. This was through our leadership, and every church themselves have their own rules and regulations. Like once again, if the other members, like Sarah and I go to the same church, this is just rules that we have at our church. It would be nice to hear also, like other rules and regulations that people might have other churches for their praise teams and things like that. um, but I think what's most important is also being able to use what you are given within your church to worship God. Like your praise teams don't have to be extravagant. We've had like Sarah, when Sarah joined praise team before as a cellist, like that was one of the bigger sized worship teams that we had. But then there was a time during the pandemic where it was just me and one other person. And
Sometimes it's just a guitar and a singer. That's it.
yeah, and that's it. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think people have to be comfortable with understanding that too, because like sure, people can judge you for all they want, but once again, if you truly understand what worship is, then it doesn't matter. You should be able to worship God regardless of what you have and what you're given, because it's between you and him. And as a worship team leader, it's you're just using what you have to also lead people to worship with what you have. And I think that's what sometimes churches miss. They focus so much on the technicalities. They focus so much on making this big, and it's like, oh, we need to make it enjoyable for everyone so that they can worship God. I'm like, no, that's not always the case. And I think being in at our church has been a blessing to have a smaller praise team. And of course, it's not saying I don't want a bigger praise team. Of course, I do. I would love a fuller praise team as well. But it's really helped me have humility and also really focus on what it means to worship as well. And I mean, it's been also very nice to hear that people have been within our congregation has been enjoying worship a lot too. So I think that's a very I think that's a very good thing that a lot of churches should. Not saying all churches don't, but churches should also kind of always come back and kind of rethink about and recenter themselves with as well. It's really important to do so. Yeah. I mean, were there any rules from previous praise team that we don't do now at our church?
Um, Rules like what?
Like joining the praise team or staying in praise team? Were there rules back then that we had that we don't implement now?
We just kind of renew it every year. Nothing really. There was not really a like. We had a. I remember when we did praise team, we had like before, like on Saturdays or Thursdays or whenever we meet, we would have like a kind of like a mini like Devo session, which the praise leader would kind of lead, um, and we would like, or maybe it would be about like the worship, like whatever we were um focusing on, like the thing. We would choose our own music. We would choose the music, and yeah, I don't know. It was kind of like a yeah, I don't know. It was just I think I don't know how you guys do it on Saturdays, so I don't know if that's what you do
Yeah.
or not.
No,
But
I
like,
mean on Saturdays we just pray to start and then get into it really. I just do a prayer. I think the biggest thing for me that I've been self-conscious about is that I've been doing very similar prayers every week. Like it's like I pray about the same things every week and I'm like there's nothing wrong with that either, right? It's what comes to my head. But it's like a certain point where I'm like am I just doing the same thing over and over again? Do I have to change up my prayer? It's
Well,
like
I mean,
something
I
I'm
think
like thinking in my
it's
head.
fine as long as it's sincere. If you're like
Yeah,
like saying copy paste stuff but like not actually meaning it, then yeah, then I think that's a problem.
yeah. It's just like the words that come into my head. It's like, oh, I feel like I'm like, yeah, it's this. I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm saying the same thing, but I'm not. It's not like I'm not being genuine about it for sure. That's
Yeah,
true.
exactly.
Jesus taught about prayer.
Like the Lord's Prayer. You
That's
could literally say the Lord's Prayer like every time.
yeah,
As long as you mean it.
exactly. And with the Philippines memory verse, right? With prayer and petition, petition just meaning repetitive. Being repetitive is fine as well. It's always okay to ask multiple times because God is listening and God's always willing to listen. So I think that's big too. We just have a couple more questions today. Today's not going to be as long of a session, but um, like I think there's tension with I guess desiring traditional hymns versus contemporary music within the Christian community as well, right? So there's that kind of I wouldn't say division, almost so, where like for example, the Korean ministry in our church really focuses a lot about traditional hymns, right? Like within the hymn book and stuff like that. But for us who sing more contemporary music, it's been hard to find like a middle ground for the two groups. Do you think there's anything that can be done to bridge that a little bit more?
I think I think that's I don't think that's I agree 100%. Like
Mm.
I think that they maybe just do the hymns because that's the only music that is translated to Korean.
Mm.
Like but I think more recently, like I remember when Pastor No came with like that book of like Korean hymns, and there are a lot of Hillsong and contemporary music in there that was translated to Korean. I remember my mom would buy some CDs, and these were like contemporary like Hillsongs, and but they're like just translated, and my mom would be like, "Wow, these are like so great," and like it's not like they don't want to listen to it, it's just they don't really have access to it as much because the hymn's been
Mm.
around for so long and been translated a lot,
Right.
right? Um, and like there's a lot of like contemporary musicians like Chris Tomlin that goes back to like the old hymns too. And I don't think there
And
is the
yeah.
tension so much as an like reappreciation for the old hymns. And it's like, oh, these old hymns have like such great lyrics and thoughtful like meaning behind them. And so like just kind of just maybe like making it more modernized, but still
Hmm.
appreciating that kind of deep, thoughtful lyrics, and I think that's fine. Like, I think both are great.
Yeah, I think I have been really enjoying when artists go back to the hymns and rearrange it and make it or like combine it together like
Mhm.
uh God You're So Good. There was a remake of that hymn into uh like half contemporary half still traditional, and then there's links that we sang Your Glory and Nothing But the Blood linking together, and I thought that was a really great song.
It was
Like there Yeah,
Joy
it
to the
was really
World
good.
and Be Thou My Vision.
Yeah,
Those were
like
like,
there's some really good ones. So it also brings up like you were saying, if the Korean community, for example, for us doesn't know it, it's like should I almost want to introduce it to the Korean community, the adult community, but at the same time I know they won't sing it after we sing it that one time, right? Uh and then Stephen asking, what about churches that do very contemporary, like Hillsong, Young and Free? Honestly, if the congregation enjoy the song, that's fine. But as long as it doesn't get to the point of like one way, I think it's fine.
yeah,
Like, yeah.
yeah. I think also like, as a praise leader, like you are thinking about your audience, right? Like, you're not gonna like, for instance, like vocal tones and stuff. Like you're considering that, and like you also consider like, these people maybe the audience if we do a joint service are like a little older, right? And
Hmm.
maybe like a fast song would be a bad idea or something, or like maybe older songs that they already know is a good better idea, and like and considering those kind of things I think is just part of the job as a praise leader as much as it is like just picking the songs that sound great.
Yeah. Like the issue with Hillsong. what the issue that Hillsong had with One Way, for those that don't know, One Way is a really hype fast song, and everyone knew it back in like 15 years ago. Everyone wanted to sing it, but the issue with that Hillsong had with it was that people were not singing it for God and to God. It was literally just singing it because it sounded good, and so Hillsong refused to play it ever again for their concerts and things like that, because everyone would ask for One Way, but it wasn't because they wanted to praise God with it. They just wanted to get hyped up with it. It was just a hype song and no longer like had its original meaning to it anymore. Once again, go answering that question, it's just make sure every any church can sing any Christian song, contemporary or traditional, just understanding why you're singing it and who you're singing it to. I think that's the most important part. And then the follow up
That's all.
says, yeah, incorporate dance. Is it appropriate for churches to incorporate dance into their worship? You've been going to a church that does really upbeat contemporary songs, and the congregation will go up into the front and jump and dance. That's fine. I think honestly, if more congregation members could come up to the front and start jumping and dancing, that'd be awesome.
Yeah,
Like,
whoever is best worship for that person. I think most people are just too embarrassed to do it. Like sometimes I want to dance too, but like I'm too embarrassed.
yeah, I mean, like if you're the only person, no, I agree. I can't be the only person like, wow, like as much as you want to sometimes, right? Like even for me, I talked to you about this actually as a worship team leader, like adding in those like ad libs in the middle and getting the congregation and all that kind of stuff. I only started recently doing that,
Mm,
and like I say it now because that's what I feel like I want to say, and I want the congregation to understand and follow through, like saying like sing it out to God, let's do that again, whatever it is, like saying those things as a worship team leader, like that did not come out naturally for me before because I was embarrassed to say it too, right? Because I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm just some like church oppa and trying to be like, I don't want to be like, it's I don't want to, I don't know, I didn't want to do that, like I don't want to be that person, right? but but as I, now that I'm in this position where I am a worship team leader, I understand why the worship leaders get called, like they just, it just comes out naturally because you feel it, like as you worship God, it's just you want the congregation to do the same, and that's the way we lead the congregation in doing
yeah.
so. Yeah.
You know what else I have a conflict with is
What?
when the lyrics say like, "Oh, stretch my hands and like spin around," and like,
And you don't do
you're,
it.
you're not, and like I'm just like, I'm not doing it, but like I want to do it, but
It's
I'm
the
also embarrassed to do it, and or like or I'm on my knees and like or like I don't know, lift my hands like or something like that. It's just like raise my hands, just like oh like I feel like I should do it, but like oh it's so embarrassing.
there's the other, oh, what's that one song like, oh shoot, there's this one song I'm singing up that does that and no one does it. Shoot, what's that
Yeah,
song
there's so
name?
many songs like that. It's just like oh my gosh, like every time I just like feel so guilty. Like
Yeah,
I'm
there,
properly worshiping God at that moment. It's such like a
yeah, it's,
conflict every time.
oh yeah, the oh, I feel like dancing, it's foolishness, I know, right? But when the world has seen the light, we're dance with joy like we're dancing now. I'm like, no one's dancing. No, not a single person in our church is dancing. And I'm like, what? Oh, come on. Like, but I mean, that's the thing you're talking about. It's just hard for people to do that. So I'd love it if
Big
our congregation came up and started dancing.
guys as a worship team need to do it, and then we'll follow. You know.
No, honestly, that's why I try to have fun as well when I'm up there with worship. Like when we sang One Way that one week, like I was legitimately having fun praising and like I was moving around and doing that. But it also doesn't help because I need to sing into the mic so the online people can hear it. But letting your body and letting your heart, soul, and mind do what it wants to when you worship it, I think is amazing. So there's nothing wrong with incorporating dance, whether it's body worship or just expressing yourself. As long as it's for God and not for the song, that's completely fine. I think that's really important for sure. Um, and I think the last thing that I want to talk about is is more so with for those in worship teams and those in, even if you go to a church, they're really thinking about the songs and analyzing Christian songs as well. Like for example, Oceans. Hillsong Oceans is a very popular song, right? Oceans is a very popular song, and it's like it's weird to do this uh, on a podcast, but I do want to kind of break it down and kind of share what I mean by this. And so, Oceans is a very popular song. It's even popular on TikTok, actually. It's actually one of the TikTok songs that you can use to make TikToks and stuff. And it was really popular last year at a certain point. But um, there, if you read the lyrics, it's very not like it's not grounded in theology. It really isn't. It's like sure there are references to walking on water and things like that, but it's not referencing or talking about who God is and why we worship God and things like that. So like specifically, it's like I will call upon your name, keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace, for I am yours, you are mine. Right? Okay. And then Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters, wherever you would call me, which is just referencing walking upon Jesus walking on water. And then take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Okay. But there's other than like there's not much theological depth within the song.
Well, I mean, it's just taking that one scene with John. Is it John? Or is it yeah, John coming out on water and like
Isn't it
falling
Peter?
and he huh?
Isn't it
Is it
Peter?
Peter? Is it Peter? And with Peter fall sorry. Peter walking on water and then when the moment he pulls his eyes off Jesus, like starts sinking and drowning. And it's like, oh God, save me. And then like Jesus is like, you dingus and like, pulls him up. But like I think like I feel like and there's no like I don't know, like theological meaning more than just like kind of like more of like a psalms, you know what I mean? Like
Mm.
just in that moment really singing out like your feeling of fear and like also just like that trust in God and faith. And I think that's fine too. I don't think like it's not like it's not based on
Yeah,
the
no, I'm not saying it's not Christian at all. That's not what I'm saying.
yeah.
I think for me as a preference, I like having songs that have uh like that are more grounded in theology and show that. I think that's my preference on songs like that. Like for this, a lot of it is also like the category. It's like this. It technically passes the whole idea of if someone sang this, or if I sang this to someone without any context that it was Christian, it would it be a generic love song? And if so, then I don't like it. It's not Christian to me, right? Because there's nothing that makes it stand out from
Like what
like
about like I don't know,
other
Matt
songs.
Rodman Heart of Worship. Like there's no real like, you know, like it's not like super deep theological. It's just more about like the idea behind it was like, worship not being really like people just singing praises and not really worshiping God and bringing it back to God.
Right, but the difference there is that it's clearly not just like a generic love song. It's focusing about why Jesus is important, who Jesus is, because King of endless word no one could express. Though I'm weak, I'm poor. All I have is yours. Every single breath. Like you're dedicating everything to God, and the song shows that, and states that, right. And it literally, the chorus is, it's all about you, Jesus. Like it specifically states
Oh, you're
who.
so you're saying Oceans just sounds like a love song and they only
It
reference
almost, yeah,
this.
it's like the other, take out one or two references and it almost sounds like a generic love song to me,
So like
right?
if
It
they
could
added
be
more instead of you, then you would have been like, yeah, that sounds great.
it would have been more, it would fit more. Like to me, it's like, I'm not saying it's a bad song. We've sang it before. I do enjoy the song. I definitely enjoy the song myself. But I think with it, I personally, I enjoy songs that have more references and links to theology and uh, showing whether dedicating your life to Jesus and not a generic love song, saying like, "Oh, I love you. I want to do everything for you," and nothing else. Like that could be any generic love song, you know. But like that references whether it's the Bible verses or things like that. Like that's what makes it for me Christian and makes it different from just any other song out there. Um, and I'm not Oceans definitely has references to the Bible once again, the whole Peter walking on water and calling out to Jesus and trusting Jesus, all right, for in those times that where things might seem impossible, right? Um, but it's like it like kind of barely crosses that line, just barely, where it's like okay, yeah, it's Christian, but it's like it like barely passes as Christian to me, like just barely. Not saying it's a bad song. I definitely wouldn't be upset if people sang that in church. Like I'm not gonna be like, "How dare you sing Oceans? It's such a non-Christian song." Like I'm not gonna say that, but
If
I feel
anything,
like
it
there are
has
other
to be
songs that show it better.
great like song for people to really get to know Jesus, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe like you did this in like you know how sometimes like praise leaders like talk about the song before or in between like
Yes.
songs and stuff, and then you can like talk about it and like be like, hey, like, do you guys know where like this song originates from, and like really bring it back to the Bible and like bringing a different light to it, and like there's like not just specifically oceans, but like other songs too, and like
Mm-hmm.
I think it could be like a great learning point, or especially if like maybe there's like a youth who really likes music, but you know have a very um like they don't really pursue God in relationships, and like you can use this as like great leeway into you know doing more like studying in the Bible and stuff. And I think
Yeah.
it's not like it's like if really for me personally, I feel like oceans is like it's like
It's a good.
enough in the Bible that I could say it's fine.
It's fine. It's Christian, right?
Yeah, but like yeah, I'm sure I do agree there are some songs that are like, is this about Jesus?
Yeah. It's hard to tell sometimes, right? As I'm just singing, and it's like this could be about a long lost girlfriend for all I know. Like it could be about any significant other. So and
Almost like
so
when
yeah,
we do the opposite where we take like secular music and then like when we change it into like
Christian music.
Christian music by adding like Jesus into it.
Yeah.
Like what was it? What did we do? Like the BTS song and uh baby like oops I did it again.
Oh yeah. Oops, I did it again. We changed that to a Christian song. That's true. We
Yeah.
did change those lyrics. That was kind of funny.
Yeah. So it's like it's almost like vice versa. That one actually worked out really well.
Yeah, it was funny. That worked out for those. Like, okay, hold on. Let's search it. Hold on. Oops, I did it. No, not yeah. Was it Oops, I did it again? Right?
Yeah, I think so. By Britney
Yeah,
Spears.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It by Britney Spears. We were like changing those lyrics to make it Christian, and
You only need to change one word.
yeah, you just need to change like one or two words, and it's instead of saying baby, baby, you say Jesus, Jesus, and change a couple of the words to like more Christian words, and everything becomes Christian after a certain point. It's funny, but like it's it's really important to me that it's really grounded in Christian theology. So that's the reason why one of one of my favorite Christian artists is Chris Tomlin, because he's a pastor and all of his music is grounded so strongly with Christian theology, and I enjoyed it a lot. So like my favorite song being "Come Home Running," it there's no way you can mistake that for a non-Christian song, right? Hit the chorus is so obvious, right? Just like we were sharing earlier, like "Come Home Running," his arms are open wide. His name is Jesus. He understands. He's the answer you're looking for. So come home running just as you are, right? Those are it's like so blatantly clear. This is Jesus. Like this is God. This is about God, right? And it even talks about like being ransomed by Savior's blood, called by name, and all that stuff. So I think, yeah, with worship music, it's something that I always consider as a praise team leader to keep in mind when we pick songs to sing in for the congregation. Like I want to sing songs that really. speaks like a conversation, and we're really glorifying or speaking to God and asking God for something, or just glorifying Him for who He is and His qualities. And I think that's kind of my personal choice. Not everyone has to do it. Not saying that's I'm not like criticizing anyone who doesn't do that. Everyone has to. Once again, that's the difference between musical choice. Like Sarah said, like with for her, she finds Ocean's fine, and that's fine too. Absolutely, right? Everyone has their own choices and on genre and music. But with that, that's an hour. That's an hour. That's we're hitting 9:30. So, I mean, do you have any other final comments you want to make, Sarah, before we end the stream today?
Yeah. Tune in next month for the next installment of the God in the Earthly World series. Tommy can let you know. I don't know what the actual next episode's about, but Tommy will let you know when he knows.
I believe the next one I said worship and music for this one, and I believe the next one is specifically going to be about media and culture.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so it's kind of like connecting the two because music is also within media and culture because different cultures
All
have
right.
music
Yeah. So
and
we'll
building
be
on that.
posting up the date for that soon. I think in October 1st we'll be posting a bunch of information.
Hmm.
Um,
Don't didn't you say you have a big announcement coming up too soon
yeah,
for
we
for
do have a
April?
big announcement coming up. We will be posting it October 1st. A
Mhm.
bunch of crazy new stuff is coming up. So look forward to that. And yeah, stay tuned. Make sure you don't mute the announcement page. And yeah, if anyone has any questions about the podcast, ask Tommy, don't ask me. And um, yeah, if you guys have any other questions about anything else, you can ask me.
Yeah, let us know. For those that don't know, I am not. Just so you know, I'm down to being a content creator for Lightly Salted. I'm not part of the admin team, so if you do have questions, please send it towards Sarah, Steven, Steve, or Dan, and they will be able to answer your questions. But if it comes to the podcast and stuff, I'd be happy to answer with things like streaming on my own platform and stuff like that. So make sure you tune in for that. Look out for the announcements. Join us on our Discord, !Discord in the chat, or you can click one of the buttons down below. But thank you so much for watching. Appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace out, everybody.
Bye.